Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump warning Iran against developing a nuclear weapon and killing protesters. As Prime Minister Netanyahu convenes an early meeting amid Iran talks. Mario Tzu at the White House. That's as Israel's president visits Australia to honor victims of the Bondi Beach shooting attack. Thousands of people hit the streets of Sydney to protest his visit. Jason Perry reports. The search continues for Nancy Guthrie. Just hours before a purported ransom deadline today, Savannah Guthrie posted a fourth video asking for more than just prayers. Arlene Richards brings us that update. Hong Kong's Jimmy Lai sentenced to 20 years in prison. That could be a life term for the 78-year-old pro-democracy icon. President Trump is urging Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping to free him. Jack Bradley with the details. And in the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks rode a stiff defense to victory last night, clinching the franchise's second Super Bowl win. Dave Martin joins us to discuss.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington this Wednesday, where they're expecting to discuss ongoing negotiations with Iran. NTD's Washington correspondent Mario Tzu brings us more from the White House.
President Trump set to hold that urgent meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a week earlier than was originally planned to talk Iran negotiations. That's as the president has repeatedly told the Iranian regime that it needs to do two things to avoid military action as the U.S. builds up its forces in the Gulf.
I told him two things. Number one, no nuclear. And number two, stop killing protesters. They're killing them by the thousands.
The announcement about Netanyahu's visit comes just a day after President Trump's top envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner held negotiations in Oman with Iran's foreign minister over a potential nuclear deal.
Iran looks like they want to make a deal very badly, as they should. Last time they decided maybe not to do it, but I think they probably feel differently. It'd be different than last time. And we have a big armada, we have a big fleet heading in that direction. We'll be there pretty soon.
Following those talks, Witkoff and Kushner visited the USS Lincoln, thanking the sailors and Marines aboard, as well as the pilot who downed an Iranian drone approaching the carrier last week. The warship and the ships in her strike group are deployed off Iran's shore in the Arabian Sea and would be the spearhead of any U.S. military action against Tehran. Meanwhile, in a statement, Netanyahu's office insists that all negotiations must include limiting Iran's ballistic missiles and ending Tehran's support for terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah.
The attempt by the most extreme regime in the world to obtain the most dangerous weapon in the world, a nuclear weapon, is a clear danger to peace in the region and in the world.
This comes as the Iranian regime leader urges Iranians to unify and participate in the coming anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. That's the 1979 uprising that ousted the pro-Western Shah, installing a dictatorship that enforces Sharia law.
As long as the enemy is not made to despair, a nation remains exposed to harm and harassment. The enemy must be made to despair.
The Trump administration's repeatedly warned about what it calls the growing global threat of Islamist ideology in the West.
Now they want to go to Sharia law, but you're in a different country. You can't do that.
When we talk about the threat of Islamism, this political ideology, there is no such thing as individual freedom or liberty.
The White House says that while negotiations take place, it reminds the Iranian regime that President Trump has many options on the table aside from diplomacy. Reporting from the White House, Mario Tzu, NTD News.
Israel's president visits Australia to honor victims of the Bondi Beach terrorist attack in which 15 people were killed. At the same time, thousands of pro-Palestine demonstrators hit the streets of Sydney to protest his visit. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog was in Australia on Monday, and he was seen laying a wreath at Bondi Beach to honor the victims of December's attack that took place during a Hanukkah celebration. A father and son duo inspired by ISIS allegedly shot and killed 15 people and injured more than 40 at Bondi Beach. After the deadly attack, Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese invited Herzog to visit the country. However, Herzog's visit to Australia was met by thousands of pro-Palestine protesters who were seen clashing with police. Many of them voiced their frustrations over Israel's war against the Hamas terrorist group in the Gaza Strip. Herzog then addressed a crowd of thousands of people from Sydney's Jewish community, saying the Bondi shooting attack was not an isolated incident.
Your Jewish identities became targets in Australia, just as you watched a massacre unfold in Israel. At 6:29 a.m. on October 7th, Simchat Torah, Hamas launched a savage war on Israel.
And he said he traveled to Australia to let the Jewish community know that Israel stands with them. Meanwhile, back in the Gaza Strip, the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas recently entered phase 2, which calls for the disarmament of the Hamas terrorist group. But according to the Jerusalem Post, a Hamas leader who is currently residing in Qatar says the terrorist group does not plan to give up their weapons, saying it would make Palestinians in the Gaza Strip what he called easy victims. And in Lebanon, tragically, a residential building collapsed. Lebanese state-run media, citing the civil defense chief, said 15 people were killed in the incident, and that years of neglect and deteriorating infrastructure has led to older buildings recently collapsing in the country. And in a related development, the Lebanese military has reportedly been continuing its efforts to disarm the Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorist group. The commander of the United States Central Command congratulated the Lebanese armed forces for recently finding a massive underground Hezbollah tunnel for the second time in 2 months. Jason Perry, NTD News.
A plea for help just hours before a purported ransom deadline today. Savannah Guthrie posted a fourth video asking for more than just prayers. NTD's Arlene Richards has details on the request.
We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
3 hours before a purported ransom deadline Monday, Savannah Guthrie put out the family's fourth video.
We need your help. Law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock trying to bring her home, trying to find her. She was taken and we don't know where. And we need your help. So I'm coming on just to ask you, not just for your prayers, but no matter where you are, even if you're far from Tucson, if you see anything, if you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement.
The Today co-host shared a few thoughts and offered thanks for the support she and her siblings have received over the last 9 days. In a third video on Saturday, the Guthrie family responding to the kidnappers' demand.
We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay.
CNN affiliate KGUN receiving a second note Saturday that says they want $6 million paid in Bitcoin in exchange for Guthrie's release. But as the clock was ticking closer to the purported deadline, law enforcement wasn't identifying any suspects or persons of interest. 2 alleged ransom notes have been sent to media outlets since Guthrie's disappearance, including one to TMZ. TMZ founder Harvey Levin told Fox News a few days ago about a note his newsroom received.
What I found interesting, because we knew she wore an Apple Watch, there are pictures of her with Savannah with that watch, but they mentioned where the watch was.
This information prompted law enforcement to take the note seriously. But on Monday, Levin checks the anonymous Bitcoin account.
We have just checked the Bitcoin account, which is anonymous, but it would show if payment was made. As of this moment, it is not.
So as the Monday deadline approaches in Tucson, still no word on whether the Guthrie family are depositing any money, if the purported kidnappers are giving proof that Nancy Guthrie is still alive, or who is sending demand letters for money to media stations. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A landmark ruling in Hong Kong, pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai was sentenced today to 20 years behind bars under Beijing's national security law. President Trump has personally asked Chinese leader Xi Jinping to consider Lai's release. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley brings us this report.
Hong Kong media tycoon and pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. It's the heaviest penalty so far under China's 2020 national security law, which virtually silences dissenting opinions in Hong Kong, just like it has been over the last century in China. Secretary of State Marco Rubio calls it an unjust and tragic conclusion to this case, saying, "We urge the authorities to grant Mr. Lai humanitarian parole." House Select Committee on the CCP Chairman John Molinar says this is the latest in the human rights abuses by the Chinese Communist Party of overstepping its promise of one country, two systems in Hong Kong. He said he'll work in Congress to sanction those responsible. Jimmy Lai's son Sebastian says the 20-year sentence of his 78-year-old father amounts to life in prison.
Obviously it was expected, but it was still pretty devastating. You kind of have doubt as to whether I'll see my father again.
Lai was convicted back in December of conspiring with others to collude with foreign forces and sedition. And at that time, President Trump said,
"I feel so badly. I spoke to President Xi about it, and I asked to consider his release. He's not well. He's an older man and he's not well, so I did put that request out. We'll see what happens."
Sebastian Lai says he's grateful for Trump's support for his father.
The President of the United States, President Trump, which has said that he will free my father, something I've been incredibly grateful for, has given our family a lot of hope, and at this point it's about saving him.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently met with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping over trade talks, and Jimmy Lai is a British citizen. But Sebastian Lai says the UK needs to do more for his father and not seek to normalize relations with China.
There's no normalization until my father's out. There's no closer relationship until my father's out, because if they can't even do something so simple, then what can we possibly expect from that relationship?
Jimmy Lai founded the now shuttered Apple Daily newspaper, once a vocal critic of Beijing. His arrest was among the first under the national security law in 2020, and he had the opportunity to leave Hong Kong, avoid arrest, and save his fortune.
But if I leave, I will be totally disgrace myself and also undermine the solidarity of the democratic movement.
Looking ahead, President Trump is expected to visit Beijing in April, potentially an opportunity to push again for Lai's freedom. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi vowed to deliver on her campaign pledges today after an election win over the weekend. She spoke in Tokyo after her party won a record majority.
We have no time to bask in the afterglow of victory. With the cooperation from the opposition parties, I will call for a special parliamentary session to pass the budget-related bills, including the next year's budget sooner rather than later.
Takaichi has pledged to revise Japan's defense policies in favor of offensive military capabilities, vowing to lift a ban on weapons exports. The Japanese Prime Minister has said she aims to address the high cost of living by suspending a sales tax on food. Takaichi has also been pushing for tougher immigration policies as part of her platform. Coming up this week on Capitol Hill, Republicans are set to vote on the SAVE Act, a measure to create voter ID requirements and eliminate non-citizen voting. The House is pressuring the Senate, and President Trump weighing in. Melina Weisskopf reports. The impact of anti-Semitism, from hostility at college campuses to canceled bank accounts. Witnesses testify on threats to religious liberty. David Lamb tells us more. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Republicans on Capitol Hill are pushing to eliminate non-citizen voting. House lawmakers are teeing up a vote this week in a bid to pressure the Senate to act. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Republicans in Congress doubling down on an effort to require voters to show ID to vote in all elections.
You look around the world, upwards of 90% of democracies require voter ID. The idea that you wouldn't have it would probably seem bizarre.
It's an effort to root out non-citizen voting, which critics argue is an issue that should be left to the states.
Every state should be allowed to decide the best way to proceed to ensure that there's a free and fair election. Here in New York, there are, in fact, voter identification requirements. The question is
the SAVE Act would set federal standards for voting requirements, which in some cases could help states enforce laws they already have on the books.
when people talk about wanting to respect states and their sovereignty, I say I'm 100% for that. The SAVE Act will stop the federal government from interfering with our ability to require that everybody on the voter rolls be a citizen of the United States.
While voter ID is a popular idea among voters from all parties, Democrats in Congress have repeatedly blocked the measure from advancing. This week, House lawmakers are ramping up the pressure on their Senate colleagues.
The problem is Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have been blocking it. So now we're calling on Leader Thune to change this and to force what we call a talking filibuster so that we can force a vote on the Senate floor.
A talking filibuster would require steep commitments from both sides of the aisle. The goal is to open up an unlimited floor debate until one side gives, allowing for a simple majority vote and sidestepping the need for Democrat support. President Trump on Friday weighing in.
I'd love to use the filibuster. The SAVE Act is very important. Voter ID, I mean, if you look at it, no mail-in voting, and you have to have proof of citizenship. Everybody wants it.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune has not committed to taking the time-consuming approach. Instead, he's aiming to attach the SAVE Act to the must-pass bill to fund the DHS.
We will get a vote on the SAVE Act at some point, and I'm not sure exactly what that context will be. It might be, maybe it's in the context of voting on the DHS bill if something's agreed upon. But there will be...
Lawmakers face an end-of-the-week deadline to fund the DHS and prevent another partial government shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
With just 4 days to go before funding runs out, Washington is bracing for a potential shutdown at the Department of Homeland Security. NTD's Chris Bobb reports.
On this vote, the yeas are 217 and nays are 214.
Last Tuesday, the House narrowly passed a 2-week measure to keep the Department of Homeland Security funded until February 13th. Now, Congress has 3 options: lock in full-year funding for DHS, buy more time with another short-term stopgap measure, or let the department's workforce, which exceeds 260,000, slide into a shutdown. Democratic leaders have framed their discussions around DHS funding for immigration and customs enforcement. Although should DHS shut down, ICE operations would likely continue largely uninterrupted. Congress last year approved $75 billion for ICE through President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, funds that can be spent over 4 years on top of regular annual appropriations. For comparison, in 2024, ICE received just under $10 billion in base congressional funding. Last week, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer sent a letter to congressional GOP leadership laying out 10 demands for policy changes at ICE. They call them, quote, common sense reforms and accountability measures required for Democrat support. The points include mandating warrants for ICE enforcement, prohibiting masks on agents, requiring visible ID at all times, protecting so-called sensitive locations, and ending what they call paramilitary uniforms and equipment. The Democratic leaders also ask for what it calls good faith actions from the Trump administration, including an end to the surge in Minnesota and the firing of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. On Thursday, Senate Majority Leader John Thune said,
if for some reason the Department of Homeland Security ends up in a shutdown, it is going to be totally on them. They will own it. We have tried repeatedly. They have agreed repeatedly before they decided not to agree and to demand something else, which they also got. But as of right now, we aren't anywhere close to having any sort of an agreement that would enable us to fund the Department of Homeland Security.
The House Appropriations Committee will hear from key federal agencies this Wednesday as they examine the potential impact of a DHS shutdown. Agencies represented will include the Coast Guard, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, TSA, Secret Service, and FEMA. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Chris Bobb, NTD News.
A federal judge has temporarily blocked a new California law which bans federal immigration agents like ICE officers from wearing face masks on duty. The California law was passed last September amid concerns over ICE operations. The federal government says the measure is unconstitutional and unenforceable against federal officers, and that it endangers agents amid rising threats like harassment, doxing, and violent protests. The dispute is expected to head to federal court, where precedent strongly favors the supremacy of federal law over state law. AG Pam Bondi celebrated the ruling, writing on X, quote, "We have no tolerance for agents being targeted just for doing their jobs." Coming up, a major social media trial is now underway in Los Angeles with claims these platforms were designed to hook kids. Christina Corona reports on what the plaintiff alleges, in which top tech executives are expected to testify. And Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. celebrates 1 year of the Make America Healthy Again project, also known as MAHA. The highlights from his speech today. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Nurses in New York City have reached a tentative agreement with 2 major hospital systems to end a nearly month-long strike. The healthcare workers have been demanding more staffing, protections against workplace violence, and a pay increase. The tentative deal involves the Montefiore and Mount Sinai hospital systems. New York Presbyterian said it agreed over the weekend to a proposal presented by mediators. Around 4,000 nurses remain on strike at New York Presbyterian. The walkouts began January 12th, leaving the hospital scrambling to hire temporary nurses to fill in. The union said members at Montefiore and Mount Sinai will vote on contracts this week. The 3-year deal affects roughly 10,000 of the 15,000 nurses on strike. The current strike represents the largest and longest nurses strike in city history. Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. marks 1 year of the Make America Healthy Again project. He spoke at the Heritage Foundation earlier today. Here's more from the event.
Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. celebrates the first year of the Make America Healthy Again project on Monday. He touts the reforms he initiated, including reducing synthetic food dyes, inverting the food pyramid, and releasing new dietary guidelines.
You can summarize it in 3 words: eat real food. And we took the politics out of it, and we made science-based, gold standard science-based recommendations. And these are recommendations that are going to keep us healthy.
Kennedy says his agency plans to remove all 9 synthetic petroleum-based food dyes from the food supply by the end of this year. The secretary highlights the health impacts of ultra-processed food and the importance of diet in preventing chronic diseases.
The costs to our society are existential. 77% of our children can no longer qualify for military service, and most of that is diet-related. And we need to change what we're feeding these children, or we're going to lose our country.
Regarding the healthcare industry, Kennedy says HHS is focusing this year on affordability and transparency.
Prior authorization is now gone. You will have an answer at point of care. In other words, before you leave that doctor's office, you will know whether your insurance company is going to pay for it.
The health secretary thanks President Trump for putting him in this role and initiating the MAHA project. He says he has been screaming about children's health with nobody paying attention for 20 years.
I was censored and shut down, and I prayed every single day that God would put me in a place where I could fix this. And so for me, when President Trump asked me to join his campaign in August of 2024, it felt providential. It felt like the answer to prayers.
Other MAHA achievements that the HHS is celebrating include lowering prescription drug prices, updating the childhood vaccine schedule, researching autism treatments, bringing back physical fitness, and withdrawing from the World Health Organization.
And joining us now to discuss is Jennifer Gallardi. She's a senior policy analyst for Restoring American Wellness in the Heritage Foundation's DeVos Center. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. You were actually at the event today. Give us a sense, what was the energy like in that room? You know, there's been a lot of talk about this. Is it becoming more bipartisan?
I wish it was becoming more bipartisan. It does seem to be solely kind of supported by people on the right. But the funny thing is, it really is people on the left that kind of came over like Kennedy did, saw a bigger goal, a more important goal than politics, and joined forces. I just wish some of our friends on the left would kind of join in this this party. It's been really fun. You asked about the energy in the room. At every MAHA event, it's almost electric, and having Secretary Kennedy there live and in person, I think really brought the energy up a little bit more. And maybe, as you're a year into a project, sometimes momentum can get stalled, but we just seem to be having win after win after win, and having him there to affirm those wins and declare them publicly in front of, a room of hundreds of people and then thousands of people online was really exciting. It's always great for all of us to come together to celebrate and then to plan the next steps forward.
And Health Secretary Kennedy saying today processed foods don't just have a physical impact. He's highlighting a spiritual realm and that we could lose our country. Talk to us about that from your own work at Heritage. What are the areas of concern and what's being done about it?
When you don't have a healthy society, you can't have a healthy country. I know from, working with clients that when you're overweight and you're obese, there is a mental toll. Depression goes up. Your brain is running on sugar. We're doing a lot of work with groups that are studying and doing research on the correlation between the microbiome, metabolic health, meaning how your cells produce energy and run energy, just like your car runs on, a good engine and a good fuel, how that affects your mental state. And there's really good research that a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet or a diet reduced in carbohydrate and sugars and insulin is really what we're looking at, a glucose and insulin response here, that those kinds of diets can have a positive impact on mental health, everything from schizophrenia to bipolar to depression. And I don't think, though, it requires a PhD to know, like, when you feel healthy, your mood is better. You have more energy to do things. You're more involved. You're more energetic. So it's definitely multifactorial. There's some definite, real biological, physiological impacts of our diet, but there's also just the general, attitude of how you feel when you eat better and you take care of yourself. It's kind of the self-respect, the idea of the body as a temple. I think almost all religions and philosophies have that idea of that our physical body is kind of the vehicle for our soul. And so it's all interconnected, and we can't treat these things as separate. And when we do, we miss the mark on how to really treat people. And we're only at that point kind of playing whack-a-mole and treating symptoms as opposed to the whole person.
And it's been a year, and it does seem MAHA is getting more focused. You had Mike Tyson's Super Bowl ad yesterday. You have changes to SNAP, Red 40 ban, so much more. Looking back, though, what have been the areas that have seen the biggest changes so far?
I think the biggest change, all of the policy changes are great, but I really think it's the messaging. That they are really out there promoting these ideas. When Michelle Obama came up with the My Plate, nobody really knew about it. Nobody knew what it was. They are putting so much attention on marketing and messaging and getting out there in front of the consumers. Super Bowl ads. Who thought that a government policy of the food pyramid and tackling obesity would be in a Super Bowl ad? Having Mike Tyson in there talking about eating real food in a very, I thought, emotional plea with his story and his sister. Celebrities coming out and supporting this despite the politics of it. I think that's huge. I think the visuals of the new food pyramid are excellent. There's something really simple and kind of beautiful about it. Your eye is attracted towards it, and it's not dogmatic. It's eat real food. I think that is such a simple but powerful message that we've been missing from leadership in government. It's always just felt so complicated. And Kennedy and his team have really simplified the message, and that's not always easy for people. They are addicted to processed food at this point. So we're not saying it's easy, but people at some point have to make those decisions. But I think the messaging is spot on and the education is there. So I'm looking forward to kind of hoping to push that further, maybe into schools, getting nutrition programs into schools, bringing a little bit of home ec back to schools, cooking classes, that kind of thing.
Well, Jennifer Ghilardi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Have a great night.
A jury is now seated in a landmark case accusing major social media platforms of intentionally targeting young users with addictive features. A 20-year-old plaintiff claims Instagram and YouTube fueled addiction and worsened her mental health. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
Opening statements began today in a landmark lawsuit involving a woman who says Meta's Instagram and Google's YouTube are addictive and harmful to children and teens. The plaintiff, identified only as Kaylee GM, alleges the companies design addictive features contributing to her mental health struggles, including depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Her lawsuit claims the platforms were built to maximize addictiveness among children to drive profits. She compares those tactics to the tobacco and gambling industries. Meta and YouTube deny the allegations, arguing they are not legally responsible for third-party content posted on their platforms. Plaintiff's attorney Mark Lanier tells Fox that he plans to highlight internal documents he claims show Meta prioritizes profit over child safety.
We've got documents where the companies themselves are claiming that they are addictive, that they are trying to drive addiction, because the more time they drive to their platforms, the more money they're able to garner. It's an attention economy that they're working.
Lanier gives the first opening statement for the plaintiffs, calling the case as easy as ABC, saying that stands for addicting the brains of children, and accusing Meta and Google of engineering addiction. 12 jurors and 6 alternates are seated after nearly 2 weeks of jury selection. Jurors are not being told to stop using social media during the trial, but the judge instructs them to not change how they use the platforms, including settings or accounts. Observers say this trial could help guide how roughly 1,500 similar lawsuits against social media companies are handled. 5 families who say they lost their child to social media are also attending the trial. The plaintiff previously reached settlements with Snapchat and TikTok earlier this month, though these companies remain defendants in other similar cases. The trial is set to last 6 to 8 weeks. Executives including Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri, and YouTube CEO Neil Mohan are expected to testify in the coming weeks. Reporting from downtown Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Witnesses share accounts of the impact of anti-Semitism on religious liberty in the U.S. Today, multiple individuals say that college campuses are where students become indoctrinated and where anti-Semitism grows. NTD's David Lamb has more.
At a hearing of the Justice Department's Religious Liberty Commission on Monday, witnesses testified on how anti-Semitism impacts religious freedom. One of the highlights, reports of hostility against Jewish students on college campuses, particularly after the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel on October 7, 2023.
Much of the hostility spreads in ways that are not easy to see, and in too many university classrooms, the notion that Israel is a settler colonial state is a taken, it's given, even though it's a lie that erases 3,000 years of Jewish history and connection to the Jewish homeland. Some students are so poisoned by such lies that they vandalize property or tear down posters with faces of Israeli children and mothers and hostages being held in Gaza.
The Religious Liberty Commission was established by President Trump to increase awareness and celebrate religious freedom in the U.S. This comes as the War Department says it's cutting academic ties with Harvard University, saying military officers were coming back from the school with, quote, heads full of globalist and radical ideologies that do not improve our fighting ranks.
The Chinese Communist Party literally refers to the Harvard Kennedy School, which is their school of public policy and government, as, quote, the party school. Chinese communists or individuals who work against American interests should not be allowed on American campuses for any reason. They should not be allowed to donate money to American campuses for any reason. So that would be one example of new policies that we should be looking into. Why is it that the Chinese communists or Islamic nations know that the secret to undermine the United States is to sort of politically indoctrinate young people?
Other witnesses brought up additional issues, including the denial of banking services. Ambassador Sam Brownback said his bank closed the accounts for his nonprofits, which advocated for religious freedom. He said the bank representative claimed they were concerned about possible criminal activities.
And I go to the counter there in suburban Kansas City, and the lady looks at this computer screen, and she says, "I'm sorry, that account has been closed." The note here on the screen says it's been done at the corporate office. It was explained the decision was final and non-revocable, and they weren't supposed to say anything more to me.
The commission will hold another hearing in March, focused on religious liberty in healthcare and social services. David Lamb, NTD News.
Coming up in the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks rode a fierce defense to victory last night, clinching the franchise's second Super Bowl win. Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And Bad Bunny versus Turning Point USA. How are Super Bowl fans reacting to the dueling halftime shows? Sam Wong hears from folks in D.C. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTV's Dave Martin. Dave, we've got some Olympic news, some college basketball news, but let's start in the NFL as Seattle beat New England last night, 29-13 to win the Super Bowl. Did it play out like you expected?
You know, in some ways it did. You know, we all knew Seattle's defense was very good, but they were even better last night. They were all over Patriots quarterback Drake May, really from the start of the game. They finished with 6 sacks. That's one shy of the Super Bowl record. And really, for all intents and purposes, that last one where May coughed up the ball and the Seahawks returned it for a touchdown was just as good as one. It looked like a strip sack. They ruled it an interception instead, but that would have been 7, tying the record. And it really seemed like it disrupted May, even on those few times where he had open receivers or he had a little time in the pocket. His throws were then not always on the mark. Let's listen to what Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald said after the game.
It's funny, I told the team on Saturday night, you know, I got a bad habit of, you know, hemming and hawing in my office and with the rest of our coaching staff thinking about, you know, plays and what we're going to run and how it's going to go. And then you get around the guys and you see them and all of a sudden all those worries don't kind of go away magically. And I think that speaks to how they played. They just just became very clear very early that they were a determined bunch, that we were going to play our style ball last night. And at that point, really, you know, the plays became irrelevant. It was really the style of how the guys played. And just to play that relentlessly throughout the game was really impressive, and really proud of those guys. They played, that was a remarkable game by our defense.
McDonald's a young guy there. He's only 38 years old, third youngest ever to win a Super Bowl. Even he was impressed by his defense there. Usually coaches aren't impressed by their own team, but I guess he was. I was.
Well, despite Seattle's dominant defense, the game was pretty close through 3 quarters. What was New England doing right?
You know, the Patriots, their own defense was keeping them in the game. I mean, Christian Gonzalez, their cornerback, he had 3 very crucial pass breaks, but it actually seemed like more. Plus, their pass rush was very good, too. It's just that Sam Darnold, he didn't really have much time to throw, but his scrambling ability, I really felt like that was a big key in the first half that kept them in the game. Now, they also got Kenneth Walker going in that first half, around the second quarter maybe. He had 94 yards rushing by halftime, helped them get in position for several field goals, give them a 9-0 lead at the break. He ended up being Super Bowl MVP. Let's listen to what he said afterwards.
It means a lot. You know, it's a blessing to be in this position. You know, it's a short list, so it means a lot to have my name on that list. And for the running backs I used to watch growing up, it's probably like Marcus Allen, Adrian Peterson, and guys like that. So it means a lot for me to be able to be in this position. Childhood friend, you know, we don't get to talk much, you know, life takes us in different paths, but he sent me a long text really just reminding me about really where we came from and how we grew up and, you know, where we are today. So I guess that text before the game meant a lot to me.
Like a very humble player for a guy who just won Super Bowl MVP. You know, he ran for more than 1,000 yards this season. Somehow he did not make the Pro Bowl. I'm sure that'll eventually change.
Well, shifting gears to the Olympics, the U.S. finally got on the medals leaderboard yesterday, but most of the attention was concern for skier Lindsey Vonn. What is the latest there?
Yeah, she's still in the hospital after that crash on Sunday. She underwent surgery on her broken left leg. Now, it's the same leg where she ruptured an ACL less than 2 weeks ago. Now, her father weighed in saying, quote, she's 41 years old and this is the end of her career. There will be no more ski races for Lindsey Vonn as long as I have anything to say about it, end quote. Now, Vonn herself shared on social media today the break was a complex tibia fracture and will need multiple surgeries. So if it is the end, she's had a tremendous career. She had a tremendous comeback this year, and we definitely wish her the best. Now, meanwhile, the games continued today with medals awarded in 5 different events here. Women's freestyle skiing, men's alpine skiing, women's speed skating, men's ski jumping, and women's snowboards. Let's have a look at our leaderboard here. You see Norway, #1 in medals here, or at least in golds, tied with Switzerland with 3 each. Japan, 2 golds, 2 silvers, and 3 bronze. You notice the U.S. not on this list. U.S. has 2 gold medals, but they do not have a silver or a bronze. So we'll see if they can get that changed here soon.
All right, well, moving to college basketball news, Arizona was ranked as the #1 team in the country for the 9th straight week, but they have a very difficult stretch ahead of them, starting with a top 10 matchup tonight.
Yes, #1 Arizona plays at #9 Kansas tonight. Big game. Wildcats are 23-0 this season, one of just 2 undefeated teams left. Kansas, meanwhile, has won 7 straight games, and they are 39-0 in big Monday games at Allen Fieldhouse on ESPN, so something is going to give tonight. But tonight is really the start of a very difficult stretch for Arizona. Now, after Kansas, they'll play 16th-ranked Texas Tech, then #22 BYU, then at #3 Houston, at Baylor, then home against #9 Kansas, and another home game against 5th-ranked Iowa State. So that's 6 of their next 7 games against ranked teams. 4 of those 6 ranked teams are in the top 10. All of them are in the Big 12, of course. And not surprisingly, the Big 12 has 6 ranked teams, as more than any other conference. I think the Big 10 and the ACC right behind them with 5 teams apiece. So tonight we've got 4 ranked teams in action. The Arizona at Kansas, that is at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Also have 17th-ranked St. John's hosting Xavier. That game just actually started. And then at the top of the hour, #24 at Louisville hosting NC State. So some important games tonight, Tiff.
A lot to keep track of.
Yes, I hope you got all that.
Davis Eyes, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
Bad Bunny versus Turning Point USA. Whose Super Bowl halftime show did people prefer? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from folks.
So what do you make of the Super Bowl halftime yesterday?
I watched the Turning Point USA halftime show, and it was fantastic.
Did you hear anything about Bad Bunny yesterday?
No, I didn't, and I kind of refused to turn my head and look and watch, and I wanted to have nothing to do with it.
I think it was impactful. He's American, so he was able to bring...
You're talking Bad Bunny, right?
Yes. He was able to show his side of his way of being American.
I thought it initially was going to be a lot worse than it was. I wasn't a fan myself. I thought it definitely would have been nice to have been able to understand it.
I like Bad Bunny. I like some of the music. Whether that be a Hispanic person performing at halftime or... doesn't really matter the skin color or race. He's American.
I didn't see any value in it. And I'm of Spanish descent, and, I've got Spanish in my background and Mexican American, and so I still, didn't understand it.
I saw some things on Instagram about it, and I just think it's a lust trap. I think that's a big problem when you look at what America is putting on the TV, and just over-sexualizing everything when, lust just leads to death.
What do you think about the difference in values between the 2 sides of the shows?
Well, again, I wish I would have seen the Turning Points show. The worldview is the complete opposite, and it's just it's night and day as far as I'm concerned.
I heard about it, I seen it, and I'm just like, this just seemed like going back to separate water fountains, separate everything else. It just seems like that was a modern day way of saying, okay, well, we'll just do this and give y'all this.
The difference of values, I think it just shows the battle of good and evil. Charlie Kirk, great guy. I know that, he ended his life lifting up the name of Jesus, and I think that's why they took him out.
I was happy to see the amount of people that actually turned off the halftime show and turned on Turning Point USA and that event.
And why do you think that is?
I think people are just sick of what's going on, and people are tired of keeping quiet.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.